Well, my friends are gone. My hair is gray. I ache in the places that I used to play. I can tell by the titters that some people are Leonard Cohen fans. Or maybe you're relating to the fact that you ache in the places that you used to play. But, you know, life is an interesting journey. And I am now in probably one of the most productive, exciting parts of my life. Yes, I've had to say goodbye to some friends all too early, but I still have a lot of crazy ones kicking around. And the hair, well, definitely gray. And when I try to do crazy things like I did this weekend, like taking out 20 years of garbage out of my garage, yeah, the joints and that let me know that things aren't working on. But the truth of the matter is this: I am now, right now, living in possibly one of the most exciting times of my life. I can't wait to get up in the morning. I am just thrilled at every day. My career is blossoming at all levels. It's just wonderful. And what do I have to owe this wonderful transformation to? Well, just over a year ago, I decided to quit my secure, well-paying job. And you can tell that was definitely a great conversation starter when I went home. Well, the truth of the matter is this. I've been working in architectural design and construction for almost 30 years. And about 7 years ago, my brother had introduced me to an architect and social activist from Vancouver. And I learned that indeed some of the things that I've been starting to feel over the years in terms of social responsibility, sustainability, all of that really was at the core of what I had to do. So it helped to solidify what I felt. Well, when I went and joined the company that I started with a while back, I knew what I was walking into. But in my mind, I decided, okay, I'm going to push all of this aside for a little while. I'm going to subvert it, and I'm going to be the good employee, and I'm going to give it all up for a secure job and great bonuses. Well, that plan worked for about 3 years until I started finding myself at odds with my boss, frequently. Well, the reality is deep down inside, I realized I couldn't suppress what I felt, what my core beliefs were. And all those years of doing it just finally came to the surface. And it erupted in one spectacular day, and thankfully it was a Friday. I was having another discussion with my boss, and we were going on and talking about the kinds of things that we were going to do. And the discussion got more and more heated, and more of that suppressed feeling that we weren't doing the right thing got to me. And it actually got to the point that I was so mad, I was so upset, I had to grab onto the furniture. I was literally shaking because I was so upset. Well, after that conversation, I realized that that was it. That was the turning point. I had to leave. And since it wasn't my company, and I wasn't going to change them, I had to go. I went home and broke the news to my wife. And I'll tell you what, there is nothing greater in life than having a wonderful partner who supports and is just an incredible partner in all aspects of life. And we talked openly about it and said, you know, really you can't deny who you are. You've got to do it. So I went out and went back, handed my 2 weeks notice and resignation in, and that was it. Now, this wasn't exactly how I thought it was going to be. I always had imagined it was kind of like those bank commercials where you see that person goes to work week after week, and then all of a sudden one day they open a design studio, or they all of a sudden they have this winery in Tuscany. Well, this was a far more scorched earth policy, and truthfully, in my case, I had to actually buy my way out of the company. I got in debt to leave the company. Brilliant plan, right? And I'm not recommending this. Let me, put this out there. I don't want to get phone calls saying, "Hey, you inspired me. I quit my job. My wife threw me out. Do you want to put me up in the garage?" Well, yeah, no. Really, it's not the way to go, but for me, it was what I had to do. So, now what? Well, design has always been part of my life, so we were going to enter in doing revitalizing an architectural design firm that I had before. But another key component was something that had been with me ever since I was a teenager, and that was the love and the passion for urban design. And that passion had led through just really decades of studying what really makes a good city, what makes cities work, why some cities work and some cities don't. And so I was really passionate about urban theory. So I couldn't just go forward with doing architectural design. I have to become an urban activist, an urban rebel, if you would call it, speaking about the things that make better places and better cities. But before I was going to launch into that, I didn't want to make the same mistake. I spent some time to get back and look at my core beliefs. And really what I found, a lot of my core beliefs came out of my life's experience. Now, I could rattle on like Grandpa Simpson for like 5 hours about all of that, but I'd like to share with you just 3 that sort of helped set the foundation. Growing up, Sunday mornings were special. They were the time that I would hop on my dad's knee and he would read me the comics. And my dad put everything into it. It was a performance. He did each character had a different voice, and it was all just wonderful and magical, and he knew exactly what it did to make me laugh. I tried to do that with my kids, but then I found out that I really can't do voices, and all my characters actually sounded like comic book guy from The Simpsons. Worst comic ever. So my dad would do this, and what we found, or what I found, is that not only was it a time of bonding, it was a time of remembrance with my father about his life. You see, when I would sit on his knee, often I would sit on his artificial leg. My father had been in World War II. He landed 2 days after D-Day and was injured by a bomb. He lost part of his leg and received shrapnel in his back and was paralyzed from the waist down. A number of guys that were in the same boat when my dad came back decided to give up on life, but that was not my father. He is one very determined gentleman, and he was completely convinced that his disability would not define who he was. And so he took on life with complete gusto. As a matter of fact, he would do things that most able-bodied people wouldn't even consider in their wildest dreams. But for my dad, there was no other choice. This was not going to define who he was. But regardless of how persistent and how determined my father was, there were times in our family that the built environment excluded him. No matter what he could do, it was either a set of stairs or railing that wasn't quite right. There was something in the built environment that wouldn't allow him to attend family events, concerts, recitals, and all of that. So living with Dad and seeing the world through his eyes, I am a strong believer that our built environment, our cities, they need to be accessible for all people. I can't imagine a world where people are excluded and their opportunity to share in their family's events is hampered just by something that's built like a set of stairs that doesn't allow accessibility. So for my dad, my lesson, my desire for cities, accessible. When our second son was born, we were completely thrilled. There had been about 8 years between the 2 boys. And we noticed shortly after he was born that his muscle tone wasn't just quite right. At the first doctor's appointment, our doctor had looked at him and said, "I think we better have him tested for Down syndrome." Well, hearing those words, my wife and I entered a point of almost mourning the life that we thought that we would never live. And that went on for a little bit, but shortly, that was a short period of time. You see, learning from my dad that a disability shouldn't define who you are, we were determined that a disability was not going to define our son, and that's how we approached his life. He had to prove to us that he couldn't do it before he could bow out. And it's interesting that in having him so active in the community and with us all the time, I don't think we were prepared for the response that we would get from some people. I never imagined in all the years of holding my son when he was born that I would actually have people would recoil in sort of horror and disgust when they saw him. Your mind just never goes there. There was a day that we enrolled him into soccer, and that was sort of the thing you do when you're a young kid, and we talked to the people who ran the league, and they said, yeah, no problem. And actually at that age, it really isn't a soccer, it's just a bunch of kids sort of following the ball around. If you're lucky, the goalie stays around and doesn't chase the gopher, but very informal. I saw across the field a guy that I had known from my work, and I wandered off to talk to him and see how things were. And he never knew my family; he just knew me as you know, from the workplace. And we were talking away and discussing this, and all of a sudden, in the middle of our discussion, he just stops and points out into the middle of the field and points at my son. And he says, "Look at that! Look at that! I can't believe they'd let a kid like that on the field with these other kids. He just doesn't belong here. He does not belong." I never imagined I'd ever hear anything like that. But the reality was we had heard it time and time again from teachers and other people who just didn't want to deal with it. They just wanted to put him out of sight. But what my son has given us, my wife and I and my older son, is this tremendous gift of love and compassion. He's a wonderful little boy. In a matter of fact, in 2 weeks he'll be graduating grade 8 from Grant Road School. He's actually a bit of a legend and an icon. And the teachers and the principal said that they just don't know what it'll be like when he's not there. You see, what I found out is that all of these kids now have been used to seeing kids in their classrooms, kids who had special needs. My crew, when a special needs kid came along at my age, they were tossed away, put out of sight, don't want to see them. And so usually that visceral gut reaction of just horror that I would see would more often than not be from guys my age. Well, kids are very different. And they are very compassionate and understanding. And at the end of the day, for cities to be healthy, they need to be inclusive. People with special needs are not something that's just tossed to the side. They need to be part of the city. And believe it or not, and this was new to me, they enrich your lives in so many ways. It definitely is a challenge at times, that's for sure. But I've learned so much from my son. And he's just made me realize that healthy cities have to include all people of all abilities, mental disabilities included. The last story I want to relate relates to myself. I remember a period of time way back when I was about 12 years old. It was the summertime, just finished a bath, hopped out of the bath and went into the kitchen where my mom and dad were, and I was just filled with the glory of life. And I announced to my parents, "I am so glad to be alive." Well, they looked at me kind of bemused and, yeah, well, good for you, son, that's nice. And it was a magical time. I actually remember sort of like almost every atom in my body was vibrating just with great enthusiasm. When I turned 50, I started looking back on my life, and I looked at this point. And then I realized that I hadn't felt that since I was 12 years old. So there were one or two things that happened. Either A, 12 is as good as it gets, everything else is gone. Or there was something not quite right with me. Not long after that, I was to meet a friend for lunch, and he was very uncharacteristically late. As a matter of fact, he wasn't able to show up at all. And he called me and said, "Can't show, we'll make another date." Fine. I'm here anyways, I'm gonna have some lunch. So I parked myself down, ordered lunch, and then I noticed there was a TV on across the way. And that day, that TV program was playing TSN. And the TSN show was a special that Michael Landsberg had done about depression. And as he told his story, and all of these athletes told their stories about depression, I realized myself in that story completely. I realized I needed to get some help. Not long after that, I found some help. And in fact, as it turns out, the wiring in my brain is just not quite right. And oddly enough, through medication, it literally changed my world and my life. I have a completely different outlook on life now. I can feel like that 12-year-old again. But one of the great realizations out of all of that is that the difference between me, this guy in the suit, and the guy that's pushing that shopping cart with all his worldly belongings in the cart, muttering to himself, the difference between him and I is a bottle of medication and a loving family and a diagnosis. That gap isn't so big. So for me, healthy cities need to include people who are struggling, people whose lives are in turmoil. We need to be compassionate, and our cities need to reflect that. And we need to provide housing for all of those who are in trouble and need to transition. Well, I'd found my mission. I had found my core beliefs again. And I was just kind of curious, is there anybody out there that thinks like I do? Well, thankfully enough, I found a group called the Urban Land Institute. And I found out there's a whole slew of people who feel the same way. Now, I had an opportunity to go to a convention about, well, a couple months now, back in April in Vancouver. And it was wonderful. I had this giddy smile on my face all along because I was in a room of people who felt the same way, that there was no other way, nothing else that you could do. You couldn't think or imagine of doing a city that wasn't inclusive, wasn't sustainable, wasn't healthy. And it was wonderful to find my people. Well, my journey is just beginning. And I know that there's going to be a lot of tough roads ahead, but I'm excited for the journey, and I'm going to treasure every step of it. I started with Leonard Cohen, and I'm going to end with Leonard Cohen. One of my favorite songs that he had penned is a song called Democracy. And there's one line that I like to grab onto that's sort of at the end of it, and he says, "I am stubborn as those garbage bags that time cannot decay. And here I am, I'm stubborn, and I'm not going away." Thank you very much.